I wanted to mention one thing just as we get rolling and I do the introduction. That is for those of you who may be somewhat new to the world of PNACAC, the Pacific Northwest Association for College Admissions Counseling. We would love to engage with you. And one of the reasons that we're offering this webinar is because we want to connect in more meaningful ways, particularly with our community college colleagues. And so this is just one small step in that direction. Secondly, I wanted to put it on your radar that this summer we'll be hosting 2 professional development workshops at the University of Portland, July 24th through the 26th. One is called Summer Institute, and that's intended for new admissions professionals, admissions counselors, typically in their first 1 to 3 years. And the other is a Middle Management Institute that is intended for those who are moving into management or who maybe aspire to that, but maybe still are earlier on in their career. And in fact, Erin Jensen, who is currently our Tech and Web co-chair or chair for PNACAC, and our now president-elect for PNACAC, will be one of the leaders for Summer Institute. Heads up, the early registration deadline is tomorrow, and it's really a great deal. It's only $250, and that includes your lodging on campus and meals for the 3 days, 2 days, depending on how you count it, 3 days and 2 nights. So we'd love to have some of you join us. And with that, let me turn to the business. Great to have a couple of presenters here. We're excited to hear from Dr. Chato. Hazelbaker is the president of Northland Pioneer College in Arizona. He may want to correct me on some of these things, but formerly was at Carroll College in enrollment management and marketing. And prior to that, at Clark College in Vancouver, Washington, as a chief communications officer. And then Dr. Eric Groves is a vice president with Liaison International, formerly was with Ruffalo Noel Levitz, also was at Washington and Jefferson College in Pennsylvania and at Point Loma Nazarene in San Diego for about 14 years. And the way we kind of got rolling with this is I learned that Eric had done his doctoral dissertation on community college enrollment and challenges and so on. And so we're glad to have them with us today. We'll turn it over to you. Thanks so much for joining us. And look, I'm excited. So yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Chato, any other things you want to say, add to your introduction, or you good?
No, I am happy to be Garfunkel to your Simon.
Well, whoa, my screen just turned white, so let's hope that changes.
While you're trying to do that, I will just explain quickly that I'm actually in presidential transition. So I am actually, so Palmer's exactly right. As I come to you today, I'm the president at Northland Pioneer College. But come July 1st, I'll be the president at Pueblo Community College in Pueblo, Colorado. So that will be my second presidency. So he's right about where I'm at today, but in moving on, I'm not that far down the road, and it looks like our slides are ready to go.
Yeah, that's important. Excited for you, Chato, as you move over there. But yeah, I live in Portland, Oregon. So you got a couple of PNACAC area people here, and very excited to be with you. So let me see if there we go. If we can go through the agenda quickly. We started with introductions, just did that. I'm going to move quickly through the state of two-year markets in the U.S. and Northwest. I have spent the last 11 years going around to different campuses across the country. I served as a senior executive over at RNL and worked with dozens of two-year institutions trying to help them grow enrollment. And the things that you're facing are real and are sort of unprecedented. So I want to make sure that to give you some things to look at that you might take to your board one of these days, or to your president to say, look, it's not. Here's why we're having enrollment challenges right now. And so, but I know that that many of you already know that, and so I don't want to spend a ton of time on that. But though we'll move to some, I think, very interesting topics after that. And emerging trends, schools looking for enrollment leaders as new college presidents. Dr. Hazelbaker would be a good example of that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then what are the basics in strategy and tactics right now that community colleges should be leveraging given the current environment? So here we go. Two-year market, current enrollment trends in the two-year impacting the two-year market. This has been well trodden, right? We know about the enrollment cliff. I've got presidents that say, if you say enrollment cliff to me, I will walk you off of this campus. I'm tired of hearing about it. I have one campus that they were like, it's not a cliff, it's a river, and so we're on the raft. I don't care what you call it. We've got a leveling of high school graduates, and that's pretty unprecedented for us in modern higher education times. It's only happened 2 other times in modern higher education, and those 2 other times were filled in with large populations of students in other sectors. So one, women started going to colleges at higher rates, and that filled in for that drop in high school graduates, which was fantastic. And the other time, adults filled in. This is the first time where we're really seeing and feeling this, and it's partly because of this. The participation rates had been a key growth driver for us, and they are not anymore. Participation rates dropped from almost 70% back as recently as 2016. Have dropped down to 62%, and most people do not who follow these trends don't think it's coming back anytime soon. The ubiquitous nature of moderately paying, low-skilled jobs is really what we're competing for in the higher ed sector, but it's hitting the two-year market more than it's hitting anybody else. If you look at participation rates for two-year college, dropped since 2018 from 25.5% down to just under 17%. So it really, that sector of the market that I just talked about, the moderately paying, low skilled jobs, that is competing directly with the two-year college sector, which is why you're seeing that so demonstratively. But I like to also point out that this is part of a long-term market contraction that's been happening in the two-year market. People say to me all the time, gosh, just the last couple of years, two-year colleges have been down. That is not true. We're actually in a 12-year enrollment downslide. It's just, as you can see, 2020, 2021, those numbers dropped. We level out a bit, but still far below those pre-pandemic numbers, and way, way below 2010 when we were at sort of our peak. So as we look to fall undergraduate enrollment, it was up 2.1%. This is total enrollment for undergraduate students, clearinghouse data. And so you can see, hey, we're up 2.1%. Primary associates or associate's degree granting institutions, we're up 1.9%. Public 2 years, we're up 4.4%. That's all well and good. Great that we had after many years of decline, are seeing a little bit of leveling out, what I would call that. Us here in the West, we have until this point been one of the benefactors of enrollment growth in the high school market, in the out of high school market. But that's going to stop going forward as the West decreases, a lot like other sectors of the market have decreased, like looking at the Northeast and Midwest as they've declined over years. You can look quickly here at Witchy data if you've not already gone in here and pulled out some of these really important for you to do so. But you can see we've got some growers in terms of states, and some states that are definitely in decline. The problem is a lot of those growth states, so people all the time say to me, how do we get more students out of North Dakota? And I say, good luck. There's like 5 of them. So, even though they're up 34%, the end count doesn't matter. You look at California, down 15% in the West. That really hits neighboring states. And so how it will hit the two-year college market in the Northwest is that as those four-year publics who've relied on California for growth and expansion, they're going to have to find students somewhere. And again, they're going to find those students by digging deeper in their current markets in most cases. And so they'll come after your two-year students in more ways than they have even recently. So when we look at new undergraduate enrollment, we were actually down for fall 2023. We had bounced back in 2022, but then in 2023 had a bit of contraction there as well. All of this points to a really flat enrollment market in the face of about 80% of institutions who say that they're going to grow, and it's just not possible. It's actually a zero-sum game situation, is the way that I would put it these days. Here's regional outlook in the short term as we look between about now and the end of this decade, and you can see there are some blue areas. Again, Nevada, Idaho, growing, but some bigger areas, Oregon, where I am, pretty flat. Washington up a little bit, but again, not enough to offset what's going on in some of those other environments. One of the things that I don't think campuses spend enough time on, and I know that two-year colleges do actually spend more time on this, but encourage you to consider this even more. There's about 40 million students nationally who have some college no credential. In fact, let's use like Washington for an example. For every 1,000 students coming out of high school, there's 3,705 students who are adults who have some college but no degree. So how do we access that market should be a major consideration for institutions these days. When we look at race and ethnicity, this is no shocker to most of you who work on campuses, that the white population has dropped pretty dramatically over the years, and our campuses are by proxy getting more diverse, which is fantastic, but certainly needs to be a consideration as we think about recruitment efforts in the future. I was on one campus recently, and they had a really great ANAPESI program, so Asian American outreach program that had some great funding to it. And I think at times in higher education, we've said, oh, Asian students, they're fine. Well, it really matters who you're serving. And so disaggregating this data becomes even more important than it's been in previous years. In their case, they were not serving a population of Asian students that went to college at high rates. And so that ANAPESI program was fantastic at targeting those students and helping them to access college because they didn't come from backgrounds where that was part of their tradition. And so those types of specific outreach programs are very important these days. You can see the changing makeup of the classes in the future of high school graduation classes, and you can see the difference that we will be seeing in higher education, which again is wonderful to see more participation by students from all different backgrounds. But let's also acknowledge that the white population going to college was kind of an easy population. A lot of schools did not work hard to enroll their classes. Now there's going to be more need to express the return on investment for higher education to families. That is really important. We don't really talk about this much, but I'd be talking to families like crazy. First generation college student families need to know the return on investment, the value of higher education. And if we don't tell them what that is for our institution, nobody else will. All right. Undergraduate student enrollment, just want to point out that when you look at traditional out of high school populations, the 18 to 20-year-old, that's actually dropped for fall 2023. The areas of massive growth are happening in lower end count areas, to be honest. but in those adult markets. And so 21 to 24 was up 14.3% for fall 2023. 25 to 29-year-old students was up 17.4%. And then you can see down there 30 and over was up almost 25% year over year. So programs devoted to those students are good areas for you to spend time on. Certificate production, very important. The two largest areas of growth over the last 2 years have been in undergraduate certificated programs and graduate certificated programs. Again, two-year institutions like yours set up well to be able to deliver those undergraduate certificated programs and should be an important consideration. We'll talk about more here soon. And then spring 2024, this is Clearinghouse's most recent data. You can see that bar up at the top shows undergraduate certificated programs, and you can see the growth that's happened over the last 2 years in that area. International students, I love Washington community colleges because y'all serve so many international students. It's important. I get people saying to me all the time, Eric, the international market's just dropped and fallen out. And that's actually not true. What's dropped and fallen out to some degree is China. And what you had was a China program and maybe not an international enrollment program. Over the last couple of years, students from India have made up for the entire decrease in students from China. And many colleges have accessed those markets, but they really need to diversify. We'll share this deck, but as you can see here, there's a lot of green on the right. A lot of these institutions over the last 2 years, a lot of these countries over the last 2 years have sent more students to the US than they had previously. In fact, you can look for some of these places. Like I said, India, 60% increase over 2 years. I would be making sure that I had a good India strategy, but looking at diversification, anytime you're just relying on one country, that is a bad way to do enrollment management, because if something happens there, then you've got to figure out where students are coming from. So really diversifying, looking at these other areas. Spoken to many schools that have pockets where they've been able to enroll students from those pockets and see large growth, and then look for other areas where they can grow. Just stated simply, for poorer families, there has not been a large increase in the value of their dollars. And so for richer families, for more wealthy families, that has not been the case. Their dollar is worth more. You can see the highest 20%. Looking back at 1992, highest 20% average family income was about $191,000 for the highest 20%. That's grown to $315,000. Well, if you look at the lowest 20%, $1992, $18,530 versus $23,580. That's virtually the same. And so financing is going to continue to be an issue for families. And as we look at the 2-year market, this is no surprise to you that most of the students who are in the 2-year market and their family's income, their parents' income is less than $40,000 a year, they are fully funded for their education, and so that means that they could have limited options in other sectors. Could be a good sector for us to lean into, but also, yeah, that is a tough group to support financially, and we've got to continue to look for ways to make college affordable, especially in your sectors. Okay, so let me sum this up, and then we'll get to Chato, who's got the brilliant part of this. But direct from high school populations have flattened. We've talked about that. Some market segments are showing growth. International students, certificated degrees, adult students. Students from diverse ethnic and racial backgrounds will make up a larger percentage of the market for colleges and universities. And so really want to consider that. And then financial constraints will continue to be a driving force into or out of higher education for lower income students. Pay attention to that or lose them at your own peril. Hope that was fast enough. Chato, I invite you to take over from here.
Great, thanks. So Eric is really, I've been fortunate enough that Eric and I have been friends for a while, which I think I count as the most important. But I've also seen Eric at work. So I was also a client at one point. And so Eric does just a fantastic job with the data and really pulling good meaning out of that data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to talk a little bit more from sort of what's happening on the ground. And I am going to invite Eric to just chime in as I talk about any of these slides, because he may have some additional insights. But very recently, I was on a panel at the National NCMPR conference in Seattle. And the panel was specifically for community college presidents were on the panel. There were 4 of us that had all moved into president's roles. So interestingly, 3 of us were from Montana, which all grew up within probably 100 miles of each other and didn't know each other until we got to the college world. But there's a bit of a trend where you're seeing the skills that you can gain in an enrollment management job really translate well to the presidency. So let's talk just a minute about why someone with an admissions and enrollment experience is really appealing into search committees right now, just in case that's something that's on your mind for future leadership. So right now, I mean, the thing that I think why enrollment leaders are such big leaders on campus, and I don't think this just applies if you want to become a president. I think this also can apply really if you're just looking to grow your leadership with the institution. Like, what is the value that you bring as an admissions professional? And so, first of all, you know where the revenue comes from and how to increase revenue. One of the things that my experience in community colleges has been is we don't talk enough about net tuition revenue. So for instance, when I was in the state of Washington, students that were running START students, which would be our early entry, dual credit, early college, whatever you want to call that, but essentially high school students taking Clark College classes. When I started at Clark College, the revenue picture on those students was essentially that basically we lost a little revenue every one of those students that came in. So there wasn't a lot of incentive on the institution from a revenue perspective. That doesn't mean there's not mission reasons to do it. That doesn't mean there's not just moral reasons to do it. But we knew that the net tuition revenue was a little lower for those students. During my time in Washington, we switched that around through state legislation, and actually each one of those students was actually bringing in a little more revenue than your baseline kind of pay student. What you think of just your sort of the rack rate, what a student is paying if they pay full tuition and they don't have any of those special programs. And it really did change the institution, right? Because we knew where the revenue was, so we knew what students we wanted to go after. And knowing as an admissions professional where the revenue is coming from is really important. And so one idea I might ask you to hold on to from this presentation is just, do you actually know what your net tuition revenue is? And if that's not a number you know as a professional, whether you're in the community college space or the university space, you should know that number, because you need to know if you're coming out. And that was really a lesson that I learned having run an enrollment shop in the private college side. Admissions and recruiting operations are very complex organizations, and you do have to work across the entire organization. So I think that's great training for presidents. Presenting in front of boards, you've been probably presenting your entire career. So that's another place where admissions professionals, I think, really have an advantage when they want to step into leadership roles. And working with the community is a necessity for two-year college. And you really know how to do that because you've been out on the road and you've been doing those things specifically over the course of your career. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what some of the basic strategies are and tactics that community colleges should be leveraging right now. And specifically, what are schools that are really winning or doing differently? Because I think post-pandemic, what you've seen some schools that are really seeing these big increases. And then you've seen some schools that are still sort of bumping along the natural pandemic growth has brought them back 1 or 2%, but they're not seeing the 10s and the 15s% that we're seeing in some of those high achievers. So first of all, it's never been more important to leverage your data in your CRM, right? This is one area where I find that community colleges don't do as good a job as their peers. So I know we've got all kinds of different institutions on the phone, but one of the things that I would just tell you that I really was very different going from a public community college back into the private college world, back into a community college, was just the whole importance of the CRM and what it could actually do. So when I was in charge of admissions at Carroll College, a moderately selective, I think we might have somebody from Carroll on, but a moderately selective institution in Helena, Montana, I actually had on my phone my preferred CRM. And when I was out in a community, I could pull up that student. I knew what we had communicated to that student. I knew what that student had communicated with us. If I met somebody, I could put them right into the CRM. But that whole idea of tracking where your students are really coming from and really working with your data and CRM is really important. So if you haven't done this in the community college space, there are options for you that are affordable. Take this back to that net tuition revenue piece. If every student is bringing X tuition revenue, you should be able to take part of that and make an argument for why you would really leverage some sort of a CRM. And one of the first things I did when I got to Northland Pioneer College is we didn't have a CRM, and we actually implemented a CRM right away, and it made an immediate impact because we were tracking communication. We could develop outbound campaigns to prospects and inquiries. You can really personalize the outreach without adding people, and that's a real key, right? So you learn how to do the things within the CRM, and many of you know more about CRMs than I do, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on specifically what your constituent relationship management system should do and which one is the best, but you get some real insights out of that. You can identify the influencers and market them as well. And then you can really just forecast more accurately. So some of you in private colleges, if we have any private colleges on, or even some of the publics that are more competitive, you might be in that magical time of year when somebody's not asking you yet about what the class of 2026 is going to look like. And I am not kidding. So you're still trying to figure out what the class of 2024 is going to look like. And you're still trying to bring those people in, and people are already in your ear for budget purposes, wanting to know what the class of 2025 and 26 looks like. Unless you have a CRM that you're really using, you really can't give them any kind of a good guess. Right. And I would tell you that I think most of the 25, 26 numbers are going to be largely a guess, but at least with a good CRM, you have an educated guess, which I think is that is good. You know, I think when implementing a CRM, so to handle Palmer's question, what are some of the hidden costs that colleges should keep in mind? I think the hidden costs really come in personnel. I think most CRMs have gotten pretty good now. Here's my answer to that. I guess my key answer to that is most CRMs are smarter than the people that are using them, and realize that when I say that, I'm making fun of myself just as much as anybody else, right? So I would say that the hidden cost is in thinking that you need to hire a bunch of people, when maybe what you really need to do is just focus on a few areas of the CRM to use really, really well until you're ready to make that case for more resources.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Chato. So I think so. When I was at school in San Diego, we brought on a CRM. Actually was able to take us from 3 processing people down to just 1 processing person. In fact, at Washington Jefferson College, for like 5 times the number of apps, I had a half a processing person. So you can really reduce on some of the processing side through having a really good CRM. However, then I did have to increase in terms of my marketing budget. In order to leverage it, I needed to have people that knew how to write, create emails, get them out, get video done, all that stuff. Now we had capability, and I needed to make sure that we were leveraging that capability. And so, yeah, it sort of shifted dollars rather than, I think at times people are like, oh, add a CRM and technology and get a big savings. Actually, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and Rosa makes a good point about having a CRM administrator. And I have experience in both hiring a CRM administrator and then doing an analysis within an office and saying, hey, we actually could be more efficient if we made this person a CRM administrator instead of whatever they're doing now. I think both are a path, but I think knowing how you're going to staff the CRM to both Aaron and Rosa's point is pretty key. And then I think the other thing is to really think about, so we talked about, first step is a CRM, or a step in the process you should be considering a CRM. The other step is, one of the things that I found that particularly in community colleges, we think about processing applications. We don't think about recruitment, right? And this goes back to way pre-COVID days when there were more community college students than we knew what to do with. So really what happened was there was a divestment from recruiting into just the registrar's office and those people that were just going to deal with the people in front of them because we had so many people coming in. And so if your college hasn't made that mindset shift yet, you might want to take a look and see, okay, how do we make that mindset shift? And that mindset shift can be in things like title. It can be about things about where your enrollment management reports and what meetings that you're in. But this is, I think, important for you to do the analysis of. There's a famous organization development quote that every organization is perfectly aligned to get the results that it's getting, right? So if you want to make an argument to your president or your executive cabinet about making a change in the way that you're structured in recruitment, one of the things to say is, do you like the results that we're getting? We're bumping along at a 1 or 2% increase every year, or maybe you're looking at a decrease every year. Right? So are you actually aligned correctly within the organization? And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because, again, just like a CRM, you could spend a lot of time on this one. But I think it's an important question to ask yourself.
I agree. And just to put a fine point on that, I would say that two-year institutions look a lot like regional publics looked about 15 years ago, as they sort of woke up to this new enrollment reality that just turning on the application won't bring me my class. And so you can look to your partners out there that are at those regional publics and see how they've grown their office to a recruitment office in most cases, from a processing sort of office, and see what your future should be looking like. So yeah.
Perfect. The fourth thing that I think you really should be looking at is really developing dual enrollment into a revenue generating market vertical, right? And what I mean by this is that wherever your dual enrollment students are, we know that that's where the growth is, and there's a lot of states that just have a lot of energy on that. But are you making it very clear how those dual enrollment students can come to your college? So one of the stories that, like, most of you are experienced professionals, and this is going to sound like a silly example to you, but in a lot of community colleges, this isn't happening. So one of the very first things I did is when we got to Northland Pioneer College, and we were in the midst of a 10-year enrollment decline, was we started sending acceptance letters. And we sent letters because we wanted the parents to get the letter and actually see the letter. But we sent an acceptance letter to every dual credit student. We had lots of dual credit students that were actually that were college students with us that never knew that they were with us, right? And sure, they got an NPC email and all that stuff, but something in their head just didn't click. Whereas if we sent that physical letter, it made a difference. Now, that was the first step. The next step was really thinking about making sure that we added to give them at the end of their time as a dual credit student, not only the admission, the fact that they were a student, but also what we'll implement this fall is every student will get a personalized plan of study for completing the next step in their degree. Now, in the state of Arizona, that's really interesting. Well, in the state of Arizona, that doesn't have to be a 2-year degree. In the state of Arizona, that can be what's called the AJEC, or the Arizona General Education Core, which we're turning into a certificate because that gives us completions, right? But that actually then will transfer to any of the Arizona universities as a completed general studies. They've completed their general studies, right? So you want to make sure your dual credit students know what that they're admitted, that they are one of your students. And then secondly, you want them to know exactly what it's going to take for them to complete whatever is the benchmark that you want them to complete at your institution. And the other key to that I would say is that then you also just want to make sure that you do that in a way that, to Eric's point earlier, make sure that it involves their parents, right? Because their parents, they are going to be unswayed by the fact that they can save thousands of dollars by attending or by finishing at your college. Their parents are going to be swayed by that. So this is really an important parent play. And then if you have local transfer partners, just use those like crazy. I had lots of good examples around the country of transfer institutions doing dual admissions programs, all kinds of other things. And remember that the market is the softest right now in those regional publics. So your students are gold to those regional publics. So be bold in what you're asking from your regional partners because your students are incredibly valuable to them.
It's really good, Chato.
And then my final point before we get into one final slide here about what has worked lately on my end is use CE and CTE programs as incubators to test new products, right? So do you have a relationship in recruitment with your continuing education or your CTE certificate programs, your career and technical education, to really incubate and test new products? So for instance, right now, there's a college in the Maricopa system down in the Phoenix area that has really done great things with artificial intelligence and actually moving that towards a degree plan. But for a lot of us, that's going to start as a non-credit program in artificial intelligence that you can get people in the door, but then just make sure that you have that clear pathway. If you've got them in for this 6-hour training on artificial intelligence, that they know that this is 3 free credits that you can apply towards your applied bachelor's degree or whatever that thing may be, right? In the same way, getting students in the door, there's all kinds of interesting ways in the doors. Brewing programs are a great way to give students science credit that then can come in because so much of a brewing program is actually making sure that they have good food handling. Could be one route to go, but there's a lot of science, right? So one of the most popular science courses in the undergraduate institution I attended was basically beer brewing. Organic chemistry 2 is what it was, but everybody knew you brewed beer in there, right? Difficult class. But if you could start that off as a CTE, you can introduce people to, and so really think about that pipeline from, some of these innovative things that you want to do. And you all, like as a college president, nothing has been more frustrating than the timeline it takes to get a new academic program. But I've learned pretty quickly, I can get a certificate up pretty darn fast. And sometimes that helps me test the market to see how much there is actually out for this.
It's a really, really good point. And so Liaison International, where I work, we have CRMs, we have great marketing campaigns. We partner with a lot of two-year institutions. So that aside, I will tell you that my new sort of moniker that I've been toting on campuses is that there is no marketing gimmick that can fix a product problem. And the reality is your enrollment growth is much more tied to how your product mix is meeting market need than it is to anything else. And so I love this one, Chato. It was really good.
Great. All right. And so I'm going to blow through this really quickly because we only have a few minutes for any questions that you have them. But what's actually worked, what I've actually seen work lately. So Northern Arizona University and Coconino Community College, both located in Flagstaff, an awesome co-admission program. So if you needed an idea to go forward with this. So we also did this when I was in Helena, Montana at Carroll College, but I think they really got it nailed down at Coconino Community College. So basically you apply to Northern Arizona University, you don't get in for whatever reason, you immediately get an acceptance from Coconino Community College. Northern Arizona says that you're accepted conditionally at NAU if you complete these classes or this degree at Coconino. It's essentially what we did in Helena, right? We said so the incentive for the community college is the student doesn't get this transfer until they complete their degree. But if they complete the degree at your institution, and many colleges then are willing to start working with them right away. So Northern Arizona doesn't just hand them off to Coconino Community College. Northern Arizona College keeps them in their enrollment pipeline so that they're actually reaching out to and communicating with those students. Chandler Gilbert Community College, I talked about the artificial intelligence program. Just a brilliant, new programs are a key to growing enrollment. If you're not adding new programs, and I don't care what part of the sector you're in, when I was running the graduate marketing program at the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, St. Paul, we did a pretty thorough analysis. And what we found out was those schools that had added new programs grew in enrollment. Those schools that hadn't added new programs, they didn't grow in enrollment. It was just that easy. There was natural enrollment growth that happened by adding new programs. Artificial intelligence is a way to go. I'm not making a moral judgment. I'm just saying that if you're not doing something in the cannabis industry, you're probably missing a potential market there. Again, that's one that could happen in the CE side that then gets students into your business program, your science programs. Pueblo Community College, where I'm about to become the president, they have done this fantastic return to earn readmission program, going after those students with some college credit that they know are still in their community, scholarshiping those students, being really proactive and consistent outreach to those students that aren't across the finish line. It's called the Return to Earn Admission Program. It's been nationally featured, really, really good program. And then at Northland Pioneer College, we got a grant to do what we call Talon. And Talon, of course, is an acronym that nobody can remember the name of. But what it means is we actually, because so many of our rural high schools can't provide dual credit instruction because of qualifications, we actually got a grant to set up electronic systems. So they essentially have a remote classroom in the high school that students can access during the day, right? So we might get 5 students from high school X, 5 students from high school Y, and 5 students from high school Z. Now we can put 15 students into a college level English 101 class. We can pay the instructor. It's live instruction, which the high school likes because you could take that part of it. The high schools in many cases are willing to provide teachers' aides to make sure that they're doing that. But we're able to provide that and link in students that way. We have 20 high schools right now on that program, and it's fantastically successful in terms of what it's meant for our growth. So it is 1:47. Eric and I are both available to take any questions we have in the last sort of 8 minutes here. And there's some information there too in terms of contact info. Eric, anything to add?
No, that's great. Yeah, there's anything anybody wants to talk about. Apologize if anybody put any chats in while I was doing the first section. I could not read them at the same time, but yeah.
That's okay. Hey, while we wait for other questions maybe to come in, let me throw one at you right now. How can admissions and enrollment folks influence program changes and program additions? Because if you're saying, and I think you're right, the key to enrollment is what you're offering, the product. Sometimes we feel like little peons. How can we play a role in that?
That's a good question. I think managing up has never been more important. I think having your thumb on data and really having data help inform decisions helps you to manage up. Yeah, I mean that I would want to. My first job in higher education, I had to learn SQL to be able to get data out of Genzabar. If any of you have Genzabar, lucky you. But all of a sudden, I became a pretty valuable person around campus because I knew more about our retention rates than anybody else on campus, for instance, because I had access to that data and could pull it. So make yourself valuable by finding ways to get access to that data and use data in actionable ways, and your voice will be heard.
Yeah, I think that's a super big key. You got to know stuff. So Palmer, I think that PNACAC got to get a new T-shirt that says, I'm an admissions professional. I drink beer and I know stuff, right? I mean, I think that ought to be your, that ought to be, you got to give that away as a giveaway. Because I think that's the key, right? So when you sit down with somebody in the business office and say, hey, let's calculate net tuition revenue. Now you've got to do all the background information so you would know actually how to count it. But I guarantee you, your business person is going to look at you in a whole different way when you ask them about those specific things. So things like net tuition revenue, things about retention rates, right? If you know your stuff, and that's the challenge, right? Is that you act like this is a profession and people are going to treat you like a professional. That's not always true. Like faculty will be faculty, but I think that in general, I think Eric's spot on. If you know your stuff, you're gonna gain some cred.
Well, the wisdom in what you're saying, I deal with a lot of CFOs on campuses, and CFOs sort of get a bad rap, that they're penny pinching. You know what they are? They want to invest in things that are going to have a return on investment. And they are skeptical often about investing in things that they don't know what investment return they're going to get. So to Chato's point, if you know what your ROI is, what your net tuition revenue is per student, and you have a strategy that's going to bring in 100 new students at a net tuition revenue of 2,000 or 3,000 per student plus state appropriations, you can start to make the case for funding some of the initiatives that you really need to grow enrollment. You'll find good partners in your CFO if you can have that kind of data clarity. So that's Chato, really good point.
Yeah, and a couple of questions in the chat here.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, go for it.
Chato, one about CRM administrator, the benefits of a CRM administrator. I actually think it's not a bad idea to go ahead and reach out to one of the CRMs and listen to one of their sales pitches so that you learn more about that. In general, it's hard to say no to salespeople. Sorry, Eric. But it doesn't hurt for you to listen to a couple of them and find out. But really what it is you don't want to have a tool that nobody's smart enough to use. I mean, that's kind of I think the key thing there. And then the second question, and I'm just being real sensitive to time here because I think we're down to 3 minutes. What are some classes that would be good to get better in enrollment management? And I think there's two lines of classes. One is whatever you can do in the marketing world, I think is really good. I mean, understanding that marketing is the 4 Ps, which means product, which means that if you're going to be in admissions, you really do have to be involved in the product side of things. So I think that the marketing classes, and then I do think just basic business, right? Like I'm not a guy who understands budgets well, but kind of back to that net tuition revenue, what are trade-offs? I think that can be pretty important. And there's some other better comments from Erica. I'm sorry about the CRM piece.
No, it's good. Yeah, Palmer, go ahead.
No, if you have something else to add, Eric, please.
Obviously, CRMs are really, really important. Liaison has a couple of different CRMs that they work with 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges. TargetX is one of our products. I saw that in the chat. But it's really important that you get the strategy right before buying the tool. And so to Chato's point, I think it's important that you sit down, try and understand your needs, how you're going to leverage. Are you going to have the capability to use the technology? And if not, you need to ask some deeper questions before just buying a tool. There's a system in the West that they bought, EAB Navigate for their retention office in all of the schools. And I go to each one of them and it is sitting on the shelf doing nothing. And essentially what's happened is they bought a tool, but the strategy wasn't right. And so they can't implement the tool. And you don't want to be in that situation. But yeah.
Yep.
Probably the worst leadership thing I ever did as a director was a poor implementation of a CRM. So
yeah.
Hey, that's a whole other webinar, man. We could spend hours talking about mistakes with implementing CRM.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for this. As we wrap up, I put in the chat, if any of you are just loving the idea of sitting in Zoom here, right after this, PNACAC is hosting a Zoom roundtable. We do these, I think on a monthly basis, a diversity table talk. If you'd like to see what that's about, I put the Zoom link in the chat. We'd be glad to have you. I'm sure I won't be there because I'm heading down the road, but I'm sure we'd be glad to have you join that. Chato and Eric, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I love this, and I'm going to be sharing it the recording up the chain at my school. Thanks everyone for being with us today. I hope it was worthwhile.
Hey, sure was. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.